Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt. It's so big. Uh, she looks like one of those rap guys' girlfriends. Uh, you know, who understands those rap guys? They only talk to her because she looks like a total prostitute. Okay. I mean, her butt, it's so big. I can't believe it's so round. It's like out there. I mean, it's so gross. Look, uh, she's just so kiss my black ass. This wasn't the beginning, and it won't be the end of the conversation around black women's bodies. The first time I thought about my butt, yes, my butt, my buttocks, my hinder part, my ass, my tail, my junk in the trunk, and saw it as an asset was in 1988 when I heard the song by Go-Go Legends, the EU band, Doing the Butt. As an undergrad, I lived close to DC and we listened to go-go, which was just a part of our party repertoire. The dance was a prequel to a mix between line dancing and twerking. I was already radical in my philosophies on Black culture liberation. So this iconic moment was instrumental to me learning about who I am and my culture. I went to a predominantly white institution. Many of us, it was a whole crew of us, on Thursday nights, we would crowd into somebody's apartment, eat fried chicken, collard greens, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, drink grain alcohol, and cry watching watching the Cosby Show and watching a different world. And part of that came from our sense of isolation, being a minority on a predominantly white campus. Our culture was what we made it, and we had to find ways to cherish it, to treasure it, to practice and operate in a space where we centered ourselves as Black people. I was ignorant, however, to such a beautiful notion of an asset like the behind being a colonial signifier that attempted to place women in a subhuman category. Greetings. I am Meredith Davis, host of the Unseeable Black Woman's Podcast, a sanctuary dedicated to elevating the voices and experiences of Black women, past and present, whose lives and stories have profoundly shaped my own journey and sense of self in these challenging times. Today, we're going to explore the life of Sara Baartman, a woman whose story embodies the struggle for recognition, dignity, and humanity. Through her experiences, we'll draw connections to the ongoing invisibility and misrecognition faced by Black women globally that feed and filter in little Black girls' sense of self in the United States. Now let's begin. Somewhere between the age of 8 and 11, I noticed that my dress in the front was much longer than my dress in the back. I wasn't the only person who noticed. My Nana, she's Bermudian, was a beautiful woman full of style, flair, decorum, and extreme high standards. She was always overly critical about the physical appearance of women in particular, and especially our family and how we would conduct ourselves. Nana offered a commentary about my dress being ill fitted and encouraged me to pull it down in the back. Additionally, she encouraged me to do exercises and diet to reduce the size of my buttocks. Otherwise, I would look like what she called a Hottentot when I got older. That was the first time I remember hearing that name. From that incident until middle school, I was overly obsessed with my looks. I always felt uncomfortable in my skin. I never bothered to ask my grandmother about Hottentot. I just knew that whoever or whatever that was, it was a spectacle and it was not a positive name. The Black woman's buttocks was admired in spaces back in the day in the 70s, and I remember in the 80s. And School Days was just an example of the ways in which Black women's bodies were explored. The film, the story of Von Dunlap, a politically militant senior at Mission College, leads a protest against apartheid in South Africa. The protest is interrupted by the fraternity Gamma Phi Gamma and their pledge class known as the Gammites. The film explores themes of activism, identity, and the clash between tradition and change within the student body. It also touched on issues of colorism, elitism, classism, and the complexity of belonging within the African American community. The film's narrative is a blend of comedy and serious social commentary, making it significant work in the genre of Black cinema. I also recall in 1990 when Belle Biv DeVoe, former members of New Edition, came out with the song Poison. Iconic. Never trust a big button to smile. That girl is poison. Now, while it sounded like it would be trouble, it was kind of like good trouble for us to think about all you had to do was smile and have a big butt and you would get whatever you wanted. That's when I think a lot of us began to think about our bodies as economies and our bodies as commodities and our bodies as transactional. Not that it didn't always exist, but in our particular generation, that is the way in which we were introduced to the commodification and the objectification of Black women's bodies. I spent a lot of time in the South. I lived in Memphis for nearly a decade and had been visiting the Bluff City since the early 90s. I had never seen asses like I saw in Memphis, baby. They, they should be in museums. Okay. The Black women were what we call cornbread fed, gorgeous, shapely women, beautiful, and men would flock to their every whim. Little did I realize I would one day create a course that would trace Black women's behinds from Sara Baartman to Beyonce. Now, we fast forward to my master's program in African American Studies. I was introduced to a documentary by South African film director Zola Maseko entitled The Life and Times of Sara Baartman, also known as Hottentot Venus. This film became a defining moment in the coalescing of my racial, sexual, and gender identity. The documentary notes and describes how Baartman was forced to play many different roles, none of which reflected her true self. Even after her death, her body was measured, dissected, and displayed in a French museum, denied both privacy and rest. The refusal to see Sara Baartman as the whole person was a haunting and daunting reminder of what it means to be rendered unseeable, objectified, dehumanized, and othered. Sarah's story was embedded within my personal narrative like a crest. In the early 2000s, I taught an upper level course entitled Africana Women, A Historical Perspective. The first lecture of each course, I completed a genealogical survey of the Black women's buttocks, beginning with Sara Baartman and ending with Beyonce. This always got the class hype and got it going. I share Sarah's story not only because of its significance to my social identity print, but also its embedding within the way society from antebellum to the present obsesses and has such a visceral response to the way in which Black women's bodies should be managed. We discuss body image, hypersexual archetypes in the media from Mammy to Jezebel to Buffy to Body. I could have begun that course in an array of ways, but I chose to open the course with Black women's bodies because this still remains one of the biggest points of contention when it comes to our existence, our agency, and how we navigate in this world. There is no woman on earth managed more under social hegemony than Black women, and none experience the interracial and intra-racial traumas of Black women born in this country. It didn't matter that Sarah knew multiple languages or possessed decorum or grace. They had never seen a body like Sarah's. Her ass had them shook. She was so dehumanized, not only in her life, but her death. When Sarah died, they removed her brain, placed it in an unmarked jar because studying her brain was insignificant. They carefully, however, submerged her entire body in a type of acid that cleared the flesh so they could maintain the skeleton. Imagine that. Upon reviewing the skeleton, they realized, oh, wow, she has the same skeleton as other human beings. Her skeleton remained in France until the Khoi people in South Africa received it hundreds of years later so they could give her a proper burial. The characters of the late 19th century of Sara Baartman resemble the avatars of Black women today. Many of us did not know the story of Sarah, including me, and how the Black woman's behind has become a point of contention for centuries. That's what it means to be unseen. So, who was Sara Baartman? She was born a member of the Khoi, an indigenous community in southern Africa. Now, let me just say, Khoi, I'm mispronouncing it. It's a click sound. It's a specific click sound to that area and that region. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I don't want to disrespect. The late 1700s were a time of upheaval in southern Africa. European arrival brought war, displacement, and violence against the Khoi people. Villagers were left to fend for themselves, and accusations flew. Bushmen were blamed for feeding cattle and hunting, while women, children, and elders faced destitution and danger. This context set the stage for the brutal disregard of women, and in this instance, Sara Baartman's humanity. Yvette Abrams, professor at the University of Cape Town and the University of Western Cape, consults with the government and works on NGOs and issues of gender equality and policy and practice. Abrams was interviewed for the Baartman documentary. According to Abrams, scientists wanted to prove that persons of African descent were subhuman, that somehow we were apart from the rest of the world. History reports that Baartman was a servant and not a slave. She worked for a free black trader as a washerwoman and nursemaid until she met Dutch farmer and British surgeon William Dunlop. Europeans have been fascinated by the women and immediately interested in 20-year-old Sarah. Abrams calls it a morbid fascination with the genitalias and special features of the Khoikhoi, especially the women. Her life took a dramatic and heartbreaking turn when she was taken from her homeland and brought to Europe in the early 19th century. There, she was exhibited as the Venus Hottentot, paraded as both an exotic curiosity and a so-called freak. Her identity as a woman, as an African, and as a human being was systematically erased and replaced by the spectacle and stereotype. Bartman's story is not just about a singular life. It's a reflection of the ways colonialism weaponized difference and weaponized Black women's bodies. It's a story of eugenics and the origins of the exploitation and dehumanization of Black women's personhood and our dignity. How entire communities were systematically erased from the narrative, and how women like Baartman bore the brunt of intersecting oppressions. My grandmother signaling my hinder parts as problematic was rooted in a narrative that traveled from South Africa to Europe to the Americas. Sarah's story forever changed the way I theoretically, pedagogically, and personally imagine a big butt as a problem. Now, as a student of literature, I understood that Baartman was a type and an archetype, a recurring symbol or motif in literature. But it wasn't her brains or achievement that gave her that title. It was the historical account of the ways in which her body was used for entertainment and to perpetuate scientific racism. I wonder if Two Live Crew, Lil Wayne, or Yo Gotti know the story or the legacy of Sarji Baartman. I wonder if Black women who spend an exorbitant amount of time obsessed with their body image and the financial and medical commitment they make to own a butt that looks like Sarah, I wonder if they know what it took for her to be who she was. Today, we have an industry dedicated to ass politics, economics, and culture. A beautiful Black fat ass is a ticket out of poverty and into spaces where one's body becomes their capital and they're able to earn money and garner resources. Imagine in the 21st century, Black women are going under the knife to have a tail or behind a hinder part that was like Sarji Baartman's, which was considered freak and unacceptable spectacle. But for many, they become defined by their behinds and their hinder parts and are just as much of a spectacle, whether they acknowledge it or not. According to the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgeons, now known as the Aesthetic Society, buttocks augmentations have become the fastest growing cosmetic surgery in the United States, increasing from 7,300 in 2012 to 48,000 in 2021. While exact figures are not available, it is estimated that millions of Americans travel abroad each year for medical care and services that include breast augmentations, tummy tucks, and what we call BBL, Brazilian butt lifts, which remain the most popular reason for medical tourism. The BBL procedure has the highest risk among cosmetic surgeries, with more than one death for every 4,000 procedures. In 2018, the estimated mortality rate was as high as 1 in 3,000 procedures, making it the deadliest cosmetic surgery. The main complication is fat embolism. Other racial and ethnic groups in the 21st century began to adopt the big butt as a symbol of beauty and desirability. From Kim Kardashian to Cardi B, their behinds take a close second to their skills and achievements. Do you think they know how butts became a fad? Do you think they understand the dehumanization that Baartman experienced in the name of science and entertainment? One of the reasons I created this podcast was to bring to the surface the deeper, more nuanced aspects of Black women's culture and how it is exploited, stolen, or misrepresented. I'm sure most Black women who are running to Miami, the DR, or Colombia to get these plastic surgeries have no idea that their decision is very much rooted in a history of control, manipulation, and exploitation. As we close, remember Sarah Baartman, not as an artifact of history, but as a person who demands our empathy and recognition. Her story challenges us to see beyond stereotypes and to acknowledge the dignity at the core of every human being. I doubt if my grandmother or my mother had any clue how damaging their critiques of my body would cost me later in life. Black women understand that nothing occurs within our lives in a vacuum. To understand and acknowledge how we influence, shape, and at times are problematized, our own self images must be addressed. Now, I'm not suggesting that people no longer perform surgery. Our bodies are a choice. However, our choices are as good as our options. I cannot assume that this message will prompt a woman to pause BBL surgery, but I do hope that she reflects and takes an honest inventory of what is considered beautiful and valuable. For Black women in the U.S., the struggle against invisibility continues. By listening, learning, and advocating for change, we can honor these stories and ensure that no one is rendered unseeable. I will end this podcast with a poem by Lucille Clifton, Homage to My Hips. These hips are big hips. They need space to move around in. They don't fit into little petty places. These hips are free. They don't like to be held back. These hips have never been enslaved. They go wherever they want to go. They do whatever they want to do. These hips are mighty hips. They're magic hips. I have known them to put a spell on a man and spin him like a top. Black women, everything about us is beautiful and perfect. This is Dr. Meredith Davis with the Unseeable Black Woman's Podcast. Click like and subscribe. Comments, share. Let's have a conversation.